When we think of ancient Egypt, we often picture towering pyramids, powerful pharaohs, and majestic gods, all intertwined with the grandeur of one of the most successful civilizations in history. But Egypt's history wasn't just built on triumphs, there were dark chapters too. Periods of strife, famine, and internal collapse threatened the very existence of this great empire. It was only through resilience, grit, and unwavering leadership that Egypt survived and eventually emerged stronger than ever. Meet Sesostris III, a king who ruled Egypt almost 4,000 years ago. He was everything you'd expect a pharaoh to be: strong, muscular, and commanding. But when you look closer, especially at his face, you see something different: a scowl, sharp features, and large ears, all symbolizing his harsh rule and perhaps his ability to overhear conspiracies. Sesostris III ruled during one of the most tumultuous times in Egyptian history, where power wasn't just held by the military but by fear, mistrust, and magical forces. As we dive deeper into Egypt's past, we see a civilization in its darkest hour, struggling against forces both natural and human. And it was during these troubled times that Egypt's survival depended on something more than just military might. It depended on its ability to adapt and the sheer strength of its rulers. This is a tale of Egypt's downfall and eventual revival, of how the once unshakable empire faced ruin and yet rose from the ashes, more powerful than ever. We start in the place where Egypt's pyramid age began, Saqqara. This is where the very first pyramids were built, a symbol of Egypt's power and permanence. But among the towering monuments, there's another side to the story, a side not often told. The story of Egypt's descent into chaos, its fall into a dark age. The Golden Age of Egypt reached its peak with the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet, only 200 years later, something started to change. King Una's pyramid complex at Saqqara, including the causeway that once symbolically connected life and death, shows a stark shift in Egypt's fortunes. The causeway's walls once depicted scenes of abundance, the ideal Egypt full of fruits, vegetables, and wealth, all thanks to the king's divine rule. But as you move further along the path, a darker image begins to emerge. Depicted on the walls are emaciated figures, suffering from famine, withering away in hunger. These weren't just mythical figures but representations of real people who were living on the edges of Egypt's great empire, the Bedouins of the desert fringes. It was a grim reminder that chaos, once thought to be far away, was creeping closer and closer to the heart of Egypt. This wasn't some abstract notion of chaos, this was real, it was happening. The causeway's art became a stark warning. Egypt was starting to wake up to the terrifying reality that its great empire wasn't as invincible as it once seemed. A force greater than any pharaoh could control. The Nile itself was beginning to betray Egypt. The floods, which had for centuries provided the lifeblood for Egypt's agriculture, suddenly began to fail. Crops withered, famine set in, and people started to starve. This was the beginning of Egypt's darkest era. For the first time, the king's divine power seemed impotent in the face of such natural disasters. Pharaoh Pepi II, Egypt's longest reigning monarch, had ruled for over 90 years, but now, in his advanced age, his physical decline mirrored Egypt's own fall from grace. No longer able to perform the symbolic acts of strength required of a king, Pepi's faltering body revealed a painful truth: Egypt's gods might no longer be listening. This loss of faith in the king triggered the first political crisis in Egypt's history. The collapse of central authority threw the country into a period of chaos. The monarchy, once the bedrock of Egyptian society, had lost its legitimacy. And in its place, the people turned to new sources of power: magic. In this desperate time, magic became a tool for survival. Ordinary Egyptians, not just priests or rulers, began using curses and rituals to protect themselves. In fact, this period saw the rise of simple, everyday spells written on figurines or clay pots, often marked with red ochre to invoke destruction. The act of smashing the pot was not just symbolic, it was an attempt to obliterate enemies, to control forces that felt too powerful to face directly. But not all hope was lost. Amid the chaos, one figure rose: Ankh-Tifi, a regional governor, a warlord who took advantage of the power vacuum. His tomb, far from the grand monuments of the past, tells the story of a man who saw his own power rise as Egypt's official authority collapsed. Ankh-Tifi's autobiography, carved into his tomb's walls, shows just how far he was willing to go to bolster his own reputation. He boasts of saving his people from starvation, of being a hero in a time of despair. But even as warlords like Ankh-Tifi rose to power, Egypt continued to be divided to smaller, independent regions, each ruled by local warlords. The central government, once the epitome of unity, was reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. And in this fractured state, Egypt faced its first civil war. Two factions emerged, one from the north and one from the south. The northern kings wore the red crown, the symbol of Lower Egypt, while the southern kings, who hailed from Thebes, wore the white crown of Upper Egypt. This division led to brutal conflict, and soon Egypt's most sacred royal tombs were desecrated, their ancient mummies destroyed. This shocking act of sacrilege severed Egypt's ties to its past. The devastation was so profound that it shook the Egyptian people to their core. Despite this, Egypt was far from finished. In the south, the warlord Mentuhotep emerged as a leader of unprecedented strength. Through sheer force of will and military might, he managed to reunite Egypt, wearing both the white and red crowns, signifying his rule over all of Egypt. Mentuhotep's rise marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, a time of renewal after centuries of despair. However, the scars of Egypt's dark age were still fresh. The fear, the suspicion, the reliance on magic, it all left a mark on the psyche of the Egyptian people. But with Mentuhotep's victory, order was restored, and Egypt began to rebuild. Food was plentiful again, agriculture flourished, and Egypt's trade routes were revitalized. This was a time of hope, and soon Egypt would be back on its feet, stronger than ever. The Middle Kingdom also saw the rise of monumental architecture, but this time it wasn't the pyramids that defined Egypt's power. Instead, it was a series of fortified towns and military structures, such as those built along Egypt's southern border with Nubia. The Egyptian Empire had learned from its past vulnerabilities, and now it was ready to defend itself with the full force of its military might. Yet, Egypt's new strength came at a cost. With the arrival of the Hyksos, a foreign people from the North, Egypt would face another period of occupation. The Hyksos, who had introduced new military technology, including the composite bow, became a significant threat. But Egypt, now fortified and more powerful than before, adapted to the Hyksos ways. They fought back, eventually driving the Hyksos out of Egypt and reclaiming their land. With this victory, Egypt's golden age was reborn. The new kingdom, led by pharaohs like Ahmose, ushered in a period of monumental power and prosperity. No longer would Egypt be vulnerable to outside forces. The pharaohs of the new kingdom were supreme, their power expressed through monumental temples and military victories that stretched far beyond Egypt's borders. The story of ancient Egypt is one of constant ebb and flow, times of glory followed by moments of terror, and yet the civilization always found a way to survive. Through every dark age, it managed to rise, adapt, and build once again. It's a testament to the resilience of a people who, despite the odds, never gave up on their world. From the pyramids to the Middle Kingdom, Egypt's journey is one of both light and shadow, and it's a reminder that even in the darkest times, strength can emerge from the most unexpected places. And so, as we look back at this incredible civilization, we see not just the marvels of the ancient world, but the indomitable spirit of a people who refuse to be defeated. The story of Egypt is a story of survival, of leadership, and of a civilization that, against all odds, found a way to thrive once more.